Welcome to the well-equipped kitchen. Today we're going to talk omelet pans. This is in fact an omelet pan. This is not technically an omelet pan, but a pan used for making omelets. And most Americans, this is what they're going to grab when they want to make an omelet. We are going to talk omelet pans today, go over some history, a little history tidbit for you today. We're going to talk about the equipment for making an omelet. Do you really need an omelet, or can you get away with a standard skillet? That is the question we're going to be delving into today on today's episode. When a French chef is going to make an omelet, this is the pan that they're going to grab. This one is made by De Bouillet. It is a carbon steel skillet. There are multiple French brands out there. This is one of them. De Bouillet, Mauviel, and Matford Bourget also make wonderful carbon steel skillets. There are also American versions of them as well, which it's maybe a hair heavier. This is made by Lodge. There are also boutique, higher-end American brands out there, I don't remember their names, that make beautiful carbon steel skillets. And you might be one of those people that has an old school pan made by Atlas Spinning Co. of San Francisco, California. South San Francisco, actually. They made carbon steel skillets. They were most famous for their woks, but they also made skillets. My grandmother used to own a couple herself, and she used to call them iron pans. An American, good old American household, this is the pan that they're going to grab. It's a non-stick skillet. This one is technically a French branded skillet. This is made by De Bouillet. It's made to look just like the De Bouillet black steel skillet. And here is the industry standard. This is only the small one here, but this is made by Vollrath. This is the Wherever non-stick skillet. Comes complete with the iconic blue Cool Handle 2. Cool Handle 3 is what this one is called now. It used to be Cool Handle 2. This used to be marketed by Lincoln. Now it's being marketed by Vollrath. It's a really old school brand of skillet, and this is non-stick coated, as is this De Bouillet here. We also have here, this is also can be used to make omelets. This is made by Mauviel. This is an 1830 skillet. It's got internal aluminum, and then the inside and outside is beautiful stainless steel. And here is an original Lincoln Wherever pan. This is made by Lincoln Food Service back in the day, before they stopped making cookware and Vollrath kind of took over. This has also has the iconic blue handle, but this is the Cool Handle 2, actually. This is solid aluminum. This is really old school pan here. This is solid aluminum. And here we have two actual omelet pans. This is a Bon Chef omelet pan, and we will get into the history of solid aluminum omelet pans in a second. And this is a Mr. Omelette. It's made by Nordic Ware. These are both original and solid aluminum. First of all, when a French chef is going to make an omelet, they're going to grab this carbon steel skillet here. This carbon steel skillet makes perfect French omelets every time. They'll use a fork as their tool inside the pan to scramble the eggs very quickly, and then using the pan and manipulating the pan, they're able to get all of the egg at the end of the skillet, and there's just a cloak of egg which they peel back, and then when they invert, they get that perfect football-shaped omelet. Carbon steel is like cast iron. This has to be seasoned, and probably the best seasoning method that I've found over the years that a lot of people do it is in the oven. This specific pan made by Debouillet cannot be seasoned in the oven. But this one, being that the handle is metal and not coated metal like the Debouillet, this can go in the oven. For the stove seasoning method, what you need to do is you need to rub about a tablespoon of oil into this pan. And if you're first bringing home one of these pans, you just bought one, wash it in hot, excuse me, hot soapy water. And then once it's washed all over, and use a plastic scrub brush or bristle brush on it, get it clean, because it will have a factory grease. It might be oil, it might be mineral oil, or beeswax, which is common in the French pans. Once it's fully washed, dry it completely. Then place it over a burner and let it dry on the burner to make sure there's no water left. Then take about a tablespoon of vegetable oil, and it needs to be a high temperature vegetable oil, like avocado oil is ideal. If you're going to use avocado oil, that's the most ideal because it's a 500-degree temperature or close to that. Place the oil in this pan, and with a folded up piece of paper toweling, wipe it completely so the whole pan is covered in the oil evenly. Then discard that paper toweling and grab a new folded up paper toweling and buff it out completely, and then you'll be left with the thinnest possible layer of oil on the inside. This can then be placed on the stove over moderate heat and heated until it starts to smoke, and just let it cook that way for 20 minutes, and then let the pan completely cool, and then it can be seasoned again and again until you get the seasoning you want. For the oven method, it needs to be a pan that's got a full metal handle, not one that's coated. This coated handle cannot go in the oven. The better method is the oven method, and a pan like this with a non-coated regular metal handle is the best. Preheat the oven to the temperature of your oil. If your oil is a 500-degree temperature avocado oil, that's what you preheat your oven to. Slide this pan in there after you've done the rubbing step and you've got that thinnest possible layer of oil. Place it in the oven and let it sit in the oven for half an hour, and then once it's done, turn the oven off and let it cool. You can then repeat the process, and what I mean by repeating the process is rubbing another layer of oil into it, buffing it out with a clean paper towel, and repeat. Only wash these pans once. Later on in these pans' lives, if you see that there's a rust spot, you can take a tablespoon of vegetable oil, the same one, and a little table salt. This is the only time you would want to use table salt because it can be sacrificed. And using a watered up piece of paper toweling, you can scrub out rust spots on the inside, and if there's a rust spot on the outside, you can scrub the rust spot on the outside. Now it's time for a little history. This is a Bon Chef omelette pan. This was patterned after the French Chef omelette pan, and the French Chef omelette pan was done at the request of Julia Child. French Chef omelette pan was made by the Pot Shop of Boston. We're going to go back to the war, the Second World War. A foundry in the Midwest was making torpedoes. And they made the torpedo tubes out of aluminum. And the end of the torpedo tube was slightly rounded and then flat. That end of the torpedo tube had to be cut off, and it was recycled. They had to cut the end off the tube so that they could fill the torpedoes with explosive material. And they took these ends and they recycled them. But they were the size and shape of an omelet pan. So they got clever and they polished them up affixed a handle to the end, and they came up with what is known as, in Julia Child's words, as a status pan. It was beautifully high polished and functioned at a very high level. And then, after the war, the foundry stopped producing torpedoes, so they couldn't get access to these pans anymore. Julia Child did have a couple of these pans, and you can see them in one of her French Chef episodes. So she contacted the pot shop of Boston when she was living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, one city over from her, and asked if they could make an aluminum omelet pan for her. And they came back with a skillet with a longer handle. This has a short handle, but they came out with one with a longer handle where the metal end for hanging it on the wall came through. It was high polished aluminum and beautiful looking. This is a vintage piece right here. This is very old. I even had to secure some washers in here to make the handle not loose. The only problem with this pan is the shorter handle. But this pan functions at a very high level, and it's solid aluminum. The other vintage omelet pan I have here, and they still make them, just not with this wooden handle, is a Nordic Ware Mr. Omelette, and they're labeled on the back. This is patterned after the Japanese omelet pan, or tamago pan as it's also called, for making Japanese rolled omelets. And the Japanese pan would not have this triangle bump in the middle. And with the Japanese pan, they take chopsticks and they work in the pan, and they can work the eggs and roll until you got this beautiful rolled omelet at the end. And so Nordic Ware made this. And originally these came with a scraper. This one is not a heat resistant scraper, so I won't use it in here, but this is just to illustrate. Came with a spatula like this, a scraper, so you could roll the omelet. And when using this pan, you start with all the eggs at this side, but you have butter on both ends, and then you tilt the pan and the egg rolls over. And then it allows you to roll the omelet. It's going to be very easier for us because we can just use this and do the same job with a heat-resistant spatula. We're going to use this pan, and this pan, and we're going to illustrate omelets. You can also use, to make an omelet, you can use this pan right here. And for omelet bar omelets, when you go to a breakfast buffet, you're often going to see these little pans because they will make your little omelet or your made-to-order eggs in it. Along with this pan, this is solid aluminum. You could also use this and do the same job. This pan has more uses. It's deeper, not as shallow as this pan. The other thing we have to look at, and I will get the measuring tape out, is bottom diameter. The bottom diameter of this débrouillé is about 7 inches. The bottom diameter of this lodge is 7.5 inches. And the bottom diameter of our aluminum pan here is about 7.5 inches. The Mauviel, 7.5 inches. Between 7 and 8 inches is what you want for proper bottom diameter. I think this nonstick skillet, which is 8 inches, it's almost too big for making a perfect French omelet because it's going to be too long. You want to be able to get that nice football shape, and I think this being at between 7 and 7.5, that's ideal. But if it's an 8 inch, that'll work as well. You don't want to use a 10 inch or 12 or 14 because it's not going to be able to function. So we're going to slide our pans out of the later so I can show you other tools that we are going to need to make omelets. When making a French omelet, a fork is the most common tool. And the fork is used in the pan to scramble the eggs. The pan is swirled and then you use the bowl of the fork to scramble the eggs. And you get nice fine curds of egg, and then the outside is a beautiful cloak of cooked egg with no brown color. Worried about scratching a non-stick pan with a fork? That's why they have this. This is a metal fork, but it's coated in silicone coating. So this can be used in a non-stick skillet and do the same job as this. It's going to work. It's slightly different than the fork, but it works out just fine. The other tool you're going to want to have is a silicone spatula like these. Sometimes once you're done using the fork, this makes it easier to help get the omelet out of the pan and get it shaped properly. The other tool, if you're going to make a lot of omelets, I would get yourself a ladle like this. This is about a 4-ounce ladle. And this works well for dosing lots of omelets. The other tool you're going to need is a whisk and a bowl. You'll be able to homogenize your eggs. And this is the ideal choice right here. This is a flat bottom bowl. I have a small one and a medium sized one. The flat bottom bowl sits flat. Also for whisks, this wire whip here with the wooden handle, this is the ideal tool because we don't want to cause any, we don't want to add air to our egg mixture. You want to be able to just homogenize your eggs completely without adding any air into your egg mixture. That is why this is important. Old school people will say you should beat it with the fork, but I think a fork doesn't homogenize it as good as this whisk does. So we will use this whisk when I show you how to do it. And when we come back, we're going to be with 3 of these pans, and we're going to show you how to make some omelets. We're going to make an absolutely plain French omelet. We're going to make an omelet with herbs, and we're going to do that as a rolled omelet. And then we're going to use this omelet pan and make a filled omelet. So we will be back. When we come back, we're going to make omelets. Welcome back to the Well-Equipped Kitchen and our episode on omelets. To make our omelet base first, what I have in here is 2 jumbo eggs along with 1 extra egg yolk. If you're using large eggs, you could do 3 large eggs and it would be okay too, but I like to boost the egg yolk just a little bit. And we are going to homogenize this with no added liquid of any kind. We're not going to use milk, water, or cream, or half and half. We are also not going to put any seasoning of any kind. No salt and no pepper. Just give it the beat. And we want to do this carefully so that the egg is homogenized. And that's what we see here. Our egg is perfectly homogenized, and you can tell when you pull the whisk up that there is no streaks of egg white. That is what you want to avoid. We'll get rid of our whisk here, because we're going to use that whisk again later. Now we have our mixture. We've also got our rubber silicone spatula here, and we have our fork. To cook omelets, the ideal is clarified butter. Julia Child liked to do her omelets with whole butter. And using whole butter, which I have some soft whole butter here, which we need for the last part of the process. Using the whole butter, what that's going to allow us to do is we're going to butter the omelets at the end. So that's why I have some whole butter here, which is for buttering. But to cook the omelets, we're going to use clarified butter. To make clarified butter, it's fairly easy. Get yourself a saucepan, place your whole butter into the saucepan, and put it over moderately low heat over a burner. And if you need be, just to be safe, if you're using gas, you can use a flame tamer. This is a flame tamer or a heat adjuster. Makes the heat very even underneath the burner. You can use that underneath your pan for making clarified butter. And just let the butter slowly melt, and you'll see it start to bubble, and the milk solids and foam will rise to the top. Just take a little cup and spoon it off into the cup. And then all you will be left with at the end is you will see it vigorously bubbling. At this point, when all the milk solids are gone, that is the water that is being removed. Just let it boil off carefully, and then you have your clarified butter. But you can always buy it in most supermarkets now carry clarified butter. It may have to be melted down before you use it because it might be at a solid. The other thing I have here is a little cup of water, which we're going to use to assess the heat of our pan. We're going to turn our burner on to high heat because this pan needs to be hot before we start. I have here nice Maldon salt and some black pepper, and I have my plates ready to go because we are going to season our eggs partway through the process. We are not seasoning our eggs ahead of time because that will toughen the eggs when we add the salt. You technically could put the pepper in here. We will talk about that in a little bit, talking about things you can mix into your eggs. We're going to take a bead of water here, and we can see it dancing on the surface. So we're going to pour in some clarified butter to film the bottom of the pan. And this pan needs to be hot. And the butter needs to be hot. I can tell now that the butter is pretty hot, so we're going to slide in. You will hear a little sizzle when you put the eggs into the pan. You will hear a little sizzle, let them settle. And then with the fork, work the pan. And then I'm going to stop at this point. And we're going to put salt, because that's important to season our omelet with salt. We're going to turn our burner off for the moment, and we're going to grind some pepper in here. Now burner's back on high. Now is when we can loosen the egg from the sides. The goal is here, no color. If you've gotten color on your omelet, in culinary school it would be burned and would be unpleasant. Want to get our nice football shape here. Now we can turn our burner off, and we will switch hands here. This is not easy. And we will turn it over. there is a tiny bit of color on this omelet, but that is very, very traditional French omelet. That's number one, folks. Very traditional French omelet, as you can see. Next, we're going to do a filled omelet. And for filling, what I have here, this is a little meat filling. This is some linguiça sausage that was sauteed with a little vegetable oil and some onions. And I have just put it into the food processor to grind it up so that it makes a nice even filling. And we are going to grab our other batch of eggs here. And for this method, we are going to heat this pan up very hot. I'm going to turn it on right now and let it heat up hot. While that's going, we're going to perform the final step for our traditional French omelet. Take some butter, and the omelet has to be buttered. That is a very traditional step. And if for some reason you used way too much clarified butter, take a piece of paper toweling and you can wipe out. And that is our buttered French omelet. Now we're letting this heat up. It needs to be hot. This solid aluminum pan is going to take longer to heat up. But I have a few drops of water in here so we can tell when it heats and gets hot. And this pan needs to be ripping hot. For this method, we want this pan ripping hot. Because this pan really needs, the eggs really need to sizzle when we add them in. Because we're going to try and be effortless and jerk the pan so that the egg flips over onto itself. We have our filling ready to go. That's hot. Now we're going to pour in our clarified butter, just like before. And you want to really let it heat up to a real hot temperature. Because if the egg doesn't sizzle when it goes into this pan, then it's not going to work out. Because the goal is to get it beautifully quickly cooked, and then it flips over, and then it's pretty much done and slides out onto the plate, and it's going to be more of a half moon shape. Doing it this way. In this method, we are not going to be using a fork like we did before, but we do have our spatula here if need be. You'll see the veils in the clarified butter, and you will also be able to smell it. We'll wait until the last second so that it just, there we go. And you will see it. And grab the pan and start to swirl. At this point, we can put some salt. As you can see, some black pepper. And we're going to use our spatula here to move the last bit of uncooked egg out to the sides here fairly easily. And if you've used enough clarified butter, this will function. Now we're going to turn our heat burner off. Lay it back on the burner. Now we can take our filling, which I heated up earlier Just need to warm it a little bit. Don't need a lot of filling in this omelet here. Just a little bit. And then take your spatula. And now is when we're going to fold it over. So we're going to get that burnt. And there is your perfectly filled omelet. It's got barely any brown color, which is what you want. This one we will also butter. It adds a nice shine and a wonderful taste. Make sure you're using good butter. I have some nice Irish Greenfields butter here. And there's your perfect filled omelet. The last one we're going to look at today is we're going to look at a rolled omelet. Pull my omelet pans out of the way here. Last but not least, our rolled omelet pan. This also needs to be heated hot, but being that it's non-stick, we're not going to heat it as hot as before. And what we're going to do for this omelet is we're going to make an herb omelet. So I'm going to take some scallions, and these are dry ingredients that we're adding into here, and some parsley. And because it's not the season, we're going to put in a little freeze-dried chives and just the tiniest amount of freeze-dried dill. And for this omelet, we'll put a little pepper inside the mixture. And there's our herb mixture. Now we're going to check our temperature. We need to put butter in both sides. Make sure the butter is swirled around. Next, we'll take our ladle with our mixture. We're going to ladle it into the first side. And then you just tilt the pan. Let the uncooked egg roll over. And we're going to put some salt in here now to season it like so. And now we'll take our tool, add a little more egg to the other side. And then because this is non-stick, this will roll. Back on the heat and we'll just start to roll. Put the last bit of undercooked egg here. Roll in. And then just keep the egg moving. Now we can start to roll. And you will roll over the hump. As you can see, it rolls over on itself. Now we can turn our runner off. We can perfectly rolled. And this one slides right out onto the pan, onto our plate. this one we will also butter, just like before. This one has a little color, which is perfectly fine, and it's perfectly sealed. Now I want to talk about the additional ingredients that we added into this omelet here. When you're working with omelets, you can whisk in anything into your omelets flavoring wise. Just don't add any salt to your omelet because that toughens the eggs. And for these omelets, if you want to gild the lily, a few grains of perfect sea salt. That's all you really need. And we have created some perfect omelets today and looked at omelet pans versus a skillet. You could do this same process with the exception of this rolled omelet. These two omelets can be done in a normal non-stick skillet utilizing this type of a fork. The only one you can't do on a normal skillet is this rolled omelet. But these are not hard to find. Nordic Wire makes them. They are wonderful. They function. This is the vintage one having the handle. They now probably have a plastic handle of some kind. But it creates perfect omelets every time. And we're going to take a look inside one of these omelets here. We're going to cut it open so you can see. It's beautifully soft inside. Could be a little less cooked inside and more soft, but that's what you want to see inside the omelet. Soft and custardy and just that cloak of fairly coagulated egg. We'll also take a look at this one here. This has the filling on the inside. You could also put cheese as your filling. Fairly simple. And then we'll cut in half this one so you can see on the inside. This is perfect layers of coagulated egg, and it's still a little bit soft and custardy on the inside. And that's our omelet story for today. My name is Joseph Duggan, and enjoy. Cheers.